In Bonn, West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl reflects the feelings of many in a direct appeal to the new Soviet leader.
Wir erwarten, und ich will das persönlich sehr unterstreichen, dass die persönliche Unversehrtheit Michail Gorbatschows garantiert wird.
Видите ли, для нас это была не просто политическая проблема. Это был вопрос выживания нации. Несколько поколений советских людей трудились, чтобы превратить нашу советскую родину в супердержаву. И вдруг в один прекрасный день мы просыпаемся и видим, что радостно улыбающийся товарищ Горбачев ведет нашу страну в пропасть. Увы, но это было именно так. Боюсь, что он сам навлек на себя свой рог.
At an internationally televised press conference from the Kremlin, the world gets its first glimpse of General Soshkin. He leaves no doubt that the era of glasnost and perestroika is over.
Товарищи, дамы и господа, мы искренне скорбим о жертвах последних событий, но мы были вынуждены предпринять эти меры для спасения Советского Союза от гибели. Стоящий перед нами кризис является результатом безответственных действий ревизионистов и предателей, проникших в самые верха нашего партийного и государственного аппарата. Мы призываем братские социалистические страны, члены Варшавского договора, немедленно принять меры, необходимые для возвращения к миру и спокойствию. Это все.
I'm afraid now we have the hardliners in charge, and that's bad news for the Soviet people. As I said, it's bad news for our relationship, and I think it's pretty bad news for all the world.
Our relationship with the Soviet Union is fundamentally changed. I think you're going to see that in the movement in Congress toward most favored nation status and trading with the Soviet Union. That's dead.
Well, the word that we had been getting from the CIA about General Soshkin was disturbing, to say the very least. He represented what we call the old guard. Now, you see, these were guys who had been spending their whole life in building up the Soviet state. So they were in no mood for Big Macs and MTV, let alone an opening in the Iron Curtain. So then, these are the facts about General Soshkin as we knew them at the time and as I reported to the President in my briefing. Legend has it that he was among the group of soldiers that raised the Soviet flag over the Reichstag in Berlin at the end of the Second World War. Well, at least that's the story he liked to tell. At any rate, we do know that he stayed on with the Soviet occupation forces there. And he probably was involved in a very brutal crackdown of a workers' uprising in 1953. There are a lot of good people who had gone down in that. As far as we know, he never married, but there's very little known about his personal life. Now, Soshkin received a certain degree of notoriety in 1968, and he led a particularly ruthless armed battalion onto the streets of Prague to suppress the so-called Prague Spring Czechoslovakia. Now, by this time, this type of work has sort of become his specialty, you might say. At any rate, he got his picture right on the front of Life magazine. Well, as you can see, it's not a very flattering portrait. Sometime around, 1982, he was appointed to the Politburo and assigned to the Interior Ministry, where he seemed to have absorbed a lot of nutty ideas that were circulating around there, including one enormous bit of crap that there was some master plan that was being engineered by the British and the Americans to destroy the USSR. I mean, Jesus. My impression was, here is a guy with his finger right there on the nuclear button who was, well, shall we say, not exactly playing with a full deck. Well, the president was sitting there and just growing a little bit more agitated and more agitated as I was giving him his briefing. Well, I suppose nobody likes to hear bad news.
Warsaw Pact leaders have been meeting in Moscow today for their first face-to-face discussions with General Soshkin, who arrived at the conference over an hour late and refused to have his picture taken. A Among other things, we are told there has been heated debate concerning the success of the Chinese military crackdown in Tiananmen Square last summer. East German leader Erich Honecker, in particular, is reported to have expressed enthusiasm for a Chinese solution to the problems in Eastern Europe.
On orders from the Kremlin, a crackdown is carried out in cities all across Eastern Europe. The actions of the security forces, however, succeed only in provoking further confrontations.
Von heute aus im Rückblick, da kann ich nur sagen, hätten wir doch eine andere Lösung gefunden. Aber den Sozialismus zu verteidigen war unser Auftrag. Wir waren ja schließlich vereidigt. Viele unserer Kameraden hatten leider nicht den Nerven für den unappetitlichen Teil dieses Auftrages. Aber wenn der Westen nicht so viel Druck ausgeübt hätte, wären wir mit dem Problem schon selbst fertig geworden.
Die Menschen in der DDR haben ein Recht auf freie Meinungsäußerung, auf eine freie Presse, auf freie Bildung von Gewerkschaften, auf freie Gründung von unabhängigen Parteien, auf freie, gleiche und geheime Wahlen.
In East Germany, thousands of so-called subversives are rounded up and jailed. Others simply disappear. Among them, several of the more moderate members of the top leadership. Egon Krenz, once thought to be the most likely successor to Erich Honecker, is said to be in Moscow undergoing surgery. Hans Modrau, the local party chief of Dresden, is appointed ambassador to Mongolia. And Politburo member Gunter Schabowski, who openly expressed sympathy for Gorbachev, is, according to rumors, tried for treason and shot.
West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl has arrived in Washington this evening for talks with President Bush. He's expected to ask for increased American military support in the event of a further escalation of the crisis in East Germany.
Not trying to elevate any chance of military confrontation. Nobody wants that, and I hope that that's true of the Soviet Union. This isn't the time to threaten militarily or to move forces around just to show machoism. That's not what's called for here. What's called for is diplomacy. What's called for is commitment to principle, backing those people who are committed to reform. Now for the Chancellor, who's got one for Chancellor Kohl?
Mr. Chancellor, what steps has your government taken to persuade General Sashkin not to intervene?
Den Verantwortlichen klarzumachen, dass eine weitere Eskalation der Gewalt, insbesondere der Einsatz der Truppen und Streitkräfte der Zentralarmee, катастрофальный Erfolg haben.
Если соседский дом загорелся, то наш долг помочь потушить его. Если мы этого не сделаем, то пожар может распространиться и перекинуться на наш собственный дом. В этом нет ничего подозрительного. Элементарная логика. В определенный момент надо прекращать всякие разговоры и принимать меры.
I was summoned to the White House at around 9 o'clock on November 14th. The Soviet ambassador had an urgent message from Sashkin that he was told to personally deliver to the president. He began by stating that the Soviet army was at that very moment moving to restore order in East Germany. And then he said that this was being done at the invitation of the East German government, that it was an internal matter and of no concern to the West. Grekov then added, and this is something that I will never forget, that the Soviet Union would guarantee our free access to West Berlin. Well, you see, the not-so-subtle implication of this was that our continued free access to West Berlin was now a courtesy of the Soviet Union and no longer our God-given right. I remember Jim Baker leaning over to me and saying, "Martin, this is going to be one damn cold winter."